are joined live by Martha and Matt at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. So they welcome over 1 million visitors a year, which makes them the biggest attraction in the entire state. We're going to find out a little bit why today as we dive in with their butterflies and moths, the most beautiful insects in the world. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Martha. Thanks so much for joining us, and take it away.
Sure. I'm happy to be here with all of you talking about one of my favorite group of insects, one of my favorite groups. And we are actually going to focus a little bit on some of our special guests today. And they are live caterpillars. So I will feature them in just a moment. But here at the Museum of Natural Sciences, we have an annual celebration called Bugfest every year. And it is taking place this Saturday. And so this is part of the reason why I have our special guests with us. But we are going to focus on the order Lepidoptera. So that is the group of insects that butterflies and moths belong to. And I was thinking, what are my favorite things about this group of insects? And one would be their caterpillars, because maybe they're not as beautiful as the adults flying around, but they're pretty fascinating. Two, I love butterflies and moths because they're everywhere. So you and I can see them wherever we may be. And sometimes we can even see the same kinds, even though we can be really far apart. So that's the second reason why I really love butterflies and moths. And third, it's a really fascinating way for us to make observations about nature in our own backyards, because we can put these plants that they rely on to survive everywhere where we live. We can put them at school, we can have them at parks, we can have them at our house. So it's a really fun way to get up and close and personal with nature. So that's my job here at the museum. I'm an educator and I'm a naturalist. So I like to make lots of observations about the things that we encounter in the outdoors. So let's look at what that word Lepidoptera looks like. So order Lepidoptera. There's 160,000 species just of moths, and there are about 17,500 species of butterflies. So there are many, many more moths than butterflies. And then here in North Carolina, we can find about 177 different kinds of butterflies, and then about 12,000 species of moths and butterflies across the United States. So we have a pretty good diversity here in North America. And then if you think about that word Lepidoptera, what does it mean? You may have heard it before. It might be a new word to you. If you are hearing this word for the first time, it won't be the last time. But I'm going to show you a picture of what that word actually means. And here's a close-up of a butterfly's wings. They look like tiny little scales, like little roof shingles. And so Lepidoptera translates to scaly wing. So butterflies and moths are the scaly winged insects. Other things that are super cool about butterflies and moths are their mouth parts, right? So if we are classifying insects by all of their different features, one of the things that we use are mouth parts. That can really tell us a lot about the different kinds of insects. So I have my little noisemaker here, and it's a great demonstration of a butterfly mouth part. So if I was flying up to a flower, that is the mouth part that I would use to get nectar from inside of the flower. And it has a special name. And I'll give you all a minute to think about what that name might be of a butterfly's mouth part. Here's a close-up picture. So under really, really high magnification. Here is a not so close-up picture. And then this is what the word is. Proboscis. So butterflies and moths have a proboscis, and this is what they're adapted to sip nectar from deep inside the flower. And in the meantime, while they are doing that and getting food for themselves, they are also gathering pollen on their bodies, and they are moving the pollen between plants. So they are an important group of pollinating insects as well. So here is the butterfly and moth general body parts. Just like all insects, they have a head and a thorax and an abdomen. They've got 6 legs, they've got antennae, and they have those scaly wings. And then if you were looking at butterfly and moth antennae, they can be really, really diverse in their shape and in their length. And I'm going to show you some pictures of that in a moment. But I also want to talk about the larval stage of a butterfly, because that's pretty unique for insects as well. Here is a close-up of a larval moth. might think it's kind of cute. Maybe you think it looks a little bit like an alien. But if you are looking at this face, you might notice antenna. Can any of you see where the antenna are on this? It's kind of hard to tell. It looks pretty different than an adult butterfly. And then I'm playing a sound for you. Can everybody hear that?
Sure can.
Yeah, so it's a pretty awesome sound. This is the sound of caterpillars eating. There are some caterpillars that are so large that if you keep them inside on their host plant and you're really quiet, you can actually hear them munching on the leaves. So they are munching with their really strong mouth parts, which are circled here. The first circle showing you the eyes of the caterpillar, and then we're circling the mouth, and then here are the antenna. So when you are looking at an insect in the body parts, you can often see those features of the adult in the larval stage too, which is pretty cool. So that is a close-up personal look at a caterpillar. Just a little face. And how does a caterpillar see or taste? That's kind of a really interesting question. I'll mention that in a moment. Maybe not how, but like what they're doing when they're growing and eating. How does a butterfly or a moth see a flower compared to you and I? Because that's pretty cool too. How do they even know where the nectar is? If you were to look at a flower, here's a picture of our flower. The flower on the left is a dandelion. So is the flower on the right. But insects are able to see different wavelengths of light. And so the flower on the right is what an insect is seeing. And so the red is highlighting the areas of the pollen within the flower. So it's kind of like a little landing zone for insects. So different flowers have different kinds of light that are seen by insects differently than you and I. So how do you tell a butterfly or a moth apart? That's another really interesting question. How do we tell them apart? So we're looking at body shape. We can look at abdomen shape. We can look at antenna. We can look at how, it's kind of a funny way to describe an insect, but how furry is an insect? How furry or fuzzy does it look? So here is a quick picture to show you one type. This one might be one you've seen before. This is one that's found all across North America. This is actually North Carolina's state butterfly. This is the tiger swallowtail. So this is definitely a butterfly. How about this one? It looks a little fuzzier. You might often see it at dusk or at nighttime. It's called a sphinx moth. This is actually one of my favorite types of moths. And I have a larvae to show you today. How about this one? You might have seen this one before. This is also a pretty, yeah, I see some hands being raised there in the background. Here's a Luna moth. And their caterpillars are super cool too. They're really big and lime green. And then here's another caterpillar, or another insect that kind of connects all of us. That you might all recognize this one. This is a monarch butterfly. And so they are migrating back and forth between Mexico and different areas in North America. So you and I can all see these either on host plants in our yard or just kind of passing through when they're making their journey north or their journey south. So butterflies or moths. If you were looking at these pictures, notice the dainty little body of the butterfly. Their antennae are pretty straight with a little club at the end. If I show you this moth picture, the moth is much furrier. That I was telling you, it's kind of funny to describe a moth as a hairy insect, but it's got a fuzzier body. And you can look at its antennae that look like little feathers. And we describe those antennae as plumose. And so a lot of moths have these plumose antennae. And this is how they are picking up on the scents of each other. So they communicate with pheromones. So moths have really different shaped antennae than butterflies. So those are some of the clues that help you figure out who is who and what is what. You can look at what food they're eating as a larvae. That kind of helps you figure out what they are as well. All right, so other favorite things about butterflies and moths. I told you a few in the beginning. Another favorite thing is how they grow, because the life cycle of insects is fascinating. So they all do it a little bit differently, but they still share many of their stages in common. So here is a picture, complete metamorphosis. That is what butterflies and moths go through. Some insects only hatch out of an egg as a miniature, And every time they molt, they look more and more like the adult version of themselves. Butterflies and moths have a complete change from larvae to adult. And there's huge variation. Remember how many thousands of species there are? You can tell them apart by looking at their eggs. You can tell them apart by the chrysalis or the pupa. You can tell them apart, of course, by the larval form and the adult form. So here is a specimen of eggs that we had at the museum. And I actually got to raise these babies at my house. So the sound of the caterpillars eating, those were caterpillars that hatched out of these eggs. And I, of course, recorded them when they were larger. So looking up close at these eggs, they all came out. And so these eggs are 3 months old already, but there's kind of these little clear openings from where the little caterpillars hatched out. And they were really tiny. And so part of being a naturalist and you and I practicing our observation skills is just looking for changes. And so if you look in this next picture here, you can see these are 2 different kinds of eggs. The one on the right was a moth larvae, and look how the eggs look different next to each other. The clear one is a larvae that just came out, and then you can see the yellowish eggs that nothing may happen with them, or they needed a little bit longer. And then you can see some that have the little dark black and orange color, and those are almost getting ready to come out of their egg. If you are looking closely at your larvae and your eggs, you can kind of see when they change and when they're getting ready to move on to the next phase. And it might look a little bit like this. Of course, in high speed. There's a lot of wiggling going on in the caterpillar phase. Wiggling to get out of your egg, wiggling to get out of your exoskeleton as you're growing into your different instars. And I have another picture to show you that next. Let me show you this. This one is going to be a black swallowtail larvae. So talking about all that wiggling. Caterpillars are eating machines, and therefore they are growing machines. They pretty much eat 24 hours a day. And if you were trying to look for a caterpillar, some of the best times to go caterpillar hunting are at nighttime, when they can come out of their hiding places and be eating without having to worry about birds coming along and finding them to snack on them. So since I just showed you the video of a black swallowtail caterpillar molting, I wanted to zoom over onto our live caterpillar so that we could take a look at it. This one came from my yard as well. Black swallowtail butterflies, their larvae love to eat parsley and carrot and dill and fennel. And that's what I had, fennel in my yard. And you might notice something about my caterpillar. What is it not doing? It's not moving, it's not eating. And so that's something really fun when you are watching a caterpillar in action. I think that this caterpillar is either getting ready to molt into its next size, or it might be getting ready to molt into its chrysalis. And so I'm gonna demonstrate really quick the position of the caterpillar because it's kind of fun to pretend to be an insect. So I'm leaning back like this. If I was a caterpillar, now you gotta picture me as a caterpillar, this part that's my arms would be the silk that I spun around my body to help me do the lean. And then when I molt, my chrysalis is in this position too. Kind of funny. So back to my caterpillar. He's kind of doing the lean. You might all notice him doing the lean. So we'll see. I'll have to report back and tell you if this one molts into its chrysalis or if it's gonna molt into the next size. And then some other really cool caterpillars to show you. I'm gonna kind of move him out of the way. I have 4. There's this one right here. And he's eating a different kind of food. He's eating the leaves of a hickory tree. You see the little horn on the back of its body right here? all of the caterpillars, and most of them that have that little horn, they're sphinx moth caterpillars. So you might hear them called hornworms. And if you ever tried to grow tomatoes or peppers and you had a big caterpillar come and eat it all, it's usually this group of moths. They have this little horn on their back. And it's not doing it right now, but this caterpillar can actually hiss. It will wave its body around and hiss at you by squeezing air out of its little breathing holes, which is pretty cool. All right, let's take a look at a few more. Let's see, gotta zoom out and find them. Here's this fun yellow one, yellow and fuzzy. And of course, its name is not yellow and fuzzy. I'll tell you its name in a moment. And then this one is called a dagger moth. Look at this amazing diversity in just 4 species of butterflies and moths. So sometimes they're really fuzzy. This yellow one too, going back to this yellow one, it's called a spotted apelloides. And I don't know how much closer we can zoom in, but it's got these little black tufts right there. Yeah. It's so fuzzy and cute. It looks like maybe you want to touch it and cuddle it and snuggle it, right? Like a little teddy bear. But if you were talking about the larvae of moths, often the really fuzzy furry moths can be the ones that sting the worst. So typically you and I would not want to pick them up with our hands, but we would be using a stick or the leaves that they're on to kind of move them around and look at them closer. So better to just look with your eyes and not touch with your hands, but very fascinating. So I think, do we have like 3 minutes left?
Yeah, certainly, however long you need.
Okay, all right, so I wanted to show you the other video. So how does it happen exactly that a butterfly changes from a caterpillar into its chrysalis or its pupa? And if you are lucky enough, you will get to see it live in person on your own. But today we're going to be lucky enough because some of our friends at the museum film these things in action. So here is a monarch butterfly molting into its last phase. You can see it's pulling out of its old skin as the caterpillar phase, and underneath is the chrysalis. And so where the head was is where the head will be of the butterfly when it comes out. There's all that wiggling I was telling you about. And then they'll be still for a while, and the outside of the chrysalis will change to be more of a green color. And this will be about a week. And then a week later, remember I was telling you how the egg changes color or the chrysalis changes color? As the butterfly is getting ready to develop, the chrysalis turns dark like the wings of the butterfly. And this is a monarch butterfly. And now the chrysalis is clear as the butterfly emerges. And this takes just a couple of hours for them to come out and hang upside down, for their wings to finish expanding and to have the blood filling their wings and to have their bodies harden so that they can fly around. So that's one example for a butterfly. This would be probably how most butterflies are changing into their butterfly form during metamorphosis. Now, my other favorite group of moths are the silk moths. And this is that cecropia caterpillar, the close-up of the face I showed you and the sound of the caterpillars chewing. That was a cecropia moth or a silk moth. They spin a cocoon around their bodies. And so caterpillars, some of them have silk glands. And so they are pulling silk from that their own bodies make, and they're making the cocoon with this silk. And it gets to be where you can no longer see what's going on inside of the cocoon anymore. It's like a little magic show. So there's the caterpillar making its cocoon, making its cocoon. This takes probably 2 days. And then this is what the cocoon looks like when it hardens. But if you want to see what was going on inside of the cocoon, you can carefully cut open that silk because it's just like a little sleeping bag. Here, we can zoom in on it and I'll show you. And there, the chrysalis would not be harmed by looking at the inside to see what's going on. And here's a video of what's going on inside. There's one last molt that has to take place. It's going to shed its old larvae skin. Remember, lots of wiggling. It's a lot of work to get out of your old skin, your old exoskeleton. And then that little form often turns to be this brown form. So here is an example of a pupa. So now instead of being a chrysalis, a lot of moths are pupating. And so they either pupate in this silken chamber like this, or they pupate, we say they pupate naked in the soil. So they don't make a little cocoon, they just they go down in the soil in a little hole and they change into this pupa form. And a lot of these will overwinter. So the ones that big cecropia moth I keep talking about, this one, the cocoons that I have at my house now, I will have until next April. So they will wait until next year to come out because it took them 3 months to get big enough to turn into their pupa. So a lot of energy being stored. All right, one more video real quick, and then we can take some questions. So at the end, this is what's happening when the moth is ready to emerge. They pull out of their pupa form with their legs. And then they have to crawl up something so that their wings can dangle upside down and let gravity do the work of letting the wings expand. And of course, the video is sped up, but you get the idea. Really fascinating. And a lot of these big moths do not eat as adults. It's just the larvae that's doing all the eating. The moths do not eat. So that's caterpillars and moths in a quick story. Again, they're really fascinating. We find them everywhere. You and I can find the same ones in the different places that we live. They sort of unite all of us, right? Because they travel back and forth and they need our help. We can give them food pretty easily by planting flowers and larvae food. So